parts of Blizzard have not taken proper ownership over the game that they're building and the experience they're trying to put people through.
Yeah.
Blizzard needs to make a firm decision. They need to make a firm decision about what the in-game UI is supposed to do in Mythic Plus. Because if you don't have Plater, or you don't have Little Wigs or whatever,
if you don't have Plater, go yourself.
Yeah.
Like straight up.
Now that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
In the game, because I mean, as a designer, your job is for the enemy to fail convincingly. Now, if your game UI, if because of the nature of your game UI has a role to play in that, and it doesn't, then you're failing. Because games, it's not a professional sport. It's not the Olympics. You are actually supposed to win. There's supposed to be a challenge, but you're supposed to win, and it's supposed to be pretty clear how you should win. And WoW fails with that.
Yeah, I think
unless you have weak ores, or you have a raid leader who is, a raid leader who telepathically knows, hey, intermission's over, tab back to the game.
Yeah, I've never had to say that.
Yeah, or get your other hand back in the keyboard, Jim, or whatever it may be.
Other hand? So you play two-handed? Nice. Maybe three hands. That's insane. Please play with your one hand on your keyboard, one hand on your mouse, please. Thank you. There was something I was going to go to. Yes, I feel like, and this is obviously, like, we're getting kind of into, well, obviously the fucking crux of this is armchair dev territory, but I think there's a little bit of armchair game studio running here, but I feel like it's probably worth it if they got like a member of staff. And obviously, if one member of staff could do this, I don't know, because I don't know how they do things in their I don't know how they literally change the stuff. But one of the great examples is the personal resource display, which is
forgotten.
No, it's not, because every now and again they'll add something to it, and I'm just sat there going,
yeah, well, even when you have dementia, you have good days.
Yeah, it feels that way. And I'm just like maybe it's just an element of if I were to start that, I would get lost in the fucking in the mist of I'm doing this for every spec now. But like, why the personal resource display has some buffs but not others fucking blows my mind. I don't know why. Like, obviously I know they're busy people and they've loads of shit to do, but I don't understand why they don't like go, okay, and here's like 3 people. Let's say, to be fair, instead of saying 1 or 2, you 3 people have one job. Your job is to make sure the personal fucking resource display shows the shit you need to make decisions to at least an acceptable degree. And the degree of that can change depending on what buffs you want to track and stuff like that. But right now, reasonably, it's actually not that bad. And it's to the point where I considered, and I did this for DK. I need to do it for a couple other specs as well. But I went through with Plater and I manually whitelisted buffs that were useful to see on the nameplate. I'm like, just do that. Like, have a thing in game that goes, this is the thing you need to know. Here's the thing you need to know. You have it now.
If Luxthos can do it, I feel like Blizzard probably can.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Now, obviously, weak ores is probably easier to work with than the personal resource display. But
there's different ways to do this.
Yeah.
So you see, whenever an enemy, and I know that, look, WoW's a UI game, you got to just goddamn embrace it. That's it. Simple as.
Yeah.
So if there is a priority, if there's a priority interrupt, that's a proper. This just needs to be interrupted. You know what? Just make something big.
Like Plater,
make it look bigger.
Plater profiles always have important interrupts, at least as best as the developers can do. From beta testing stuff it's an orange.
Yeah.
So if you're a complete I don't learn shit with this game, I just autopilot and play, you just learn to interrupt the scarier looking ones.
Let's say there's dispels. Let's say a player has got to be dispelled. They probably need a more common design language for that. And then there are different types of dispels. So there's a dispel that you need to get rid of. There's a dispel that will blow up in a bad way. Yeah, there's a dispel you need to drop on top of something. Well, guess what? Yeah. You can do that with effects. Take the dispel that you need to drop on top of the Silken Court boss. Well, you know what? Maybe you have a swirly something in the player, or whatever.
A little swirly that goes down.
But it goes... And it sort of visually draws you into where you need to go. Because people, you may be like, well, that's holding the player's hand.
Yeah.
The thing is, it is. But also, knowing to do that is just a binary knowledge thing.
Same way.
That's the problem. It's a binary knowledge thing. So there's really no skill expression in knowing where you need to run whenever you get that, because you either know it or you don't. The skill expression is not dropping it on top of your friends.
It's the same thing with the rolling acid, right? The rolling acid it's insanely handholdy because it is physically showing you you're going to be hit. Here's the line. Here's where it goes.
Yeah.
It's not handholdy, but it's perfect.
It's not. Perfect. I disagree that that's handholdy.
Well, I'm just saying by that thing. It is.
Okay, fair. What it is a clearly expressed mechanic.
Yeah.
So you know how to play it, and it's intuitive. And I think that example of if you have a dispel that you need to drop on top of a boss, well, maybe you have a standard effect. Even if it was an arrow telling you where to run, that only solves a player lack of information that they could only otherwise find in the dungeon journal. So it's just a convenient way of giving people info. It makes the game's design more clear, which means a player understands what they've got to do. And then if the problem is, dispel it on time, well, then that's players. That's players working out how to play the game. If it's, you gotta walk over here, but don't run on top of your friend and kill them. Great. Those all are fine in a handholdy way, because it turns out telling the player what their objective is not handholding. The challenge is achieving that objective. And right now, people don't feel like they can access the challenge in a way that'll like manifest flow because it's too hard to focus because the game is not clear in its communications.
Yeah, I think the finest example of this is probably the Stone Vault first boss dispel. Do you remember how that works?
Sorry, say that again.
Stone Vault first boss dispel.
Which one's that?
It's the one in the tank, so you probably don't because you're the DPS. But so the tank gets, I can't remember what it's called, but they get a debuff when they get hit by something. And if that dispel will give them a huge amount of damage reduction or a shield whenever it goes off, whenever it's dispelled, right? So you hold the debuff until the boss is casting its big tank buster. Then you dispel. Then the tank doesn't die to the tank buster. How do you figure that out? You read the tooltip. Or you see it, or you get told it after the third time you as a healer didn't do it right and got kicked from a group or depleted because you didn't know it and no one explained it. It's really it's kind of awkward. And how do you explain that naturally in visual? I don't fucking know. I don't fucking know.
Sorry.
Tank gets a debuff.
Yeah.
That debuff looks like a dangerous debuff. Dispel, get rid of it. It's just a normal magic debuff.
Yeah.
But you have to wait until the boss is doing a tank buster to dispel it. If you automatically go, oh, that's a nasty debuff, dispel, because it's on your unit frames as a debuff, you go, oh, naturally you dispel things immediately. So it's like, don't dispel immediately, wait.
Well, then you need a design language for a timed dispel, because that's the category of that dispel.
Two problems. One is the time is variable because boss spell queuing.
Okay.
Obviously. The other problem is you don't see the debuff on the tank.
You see in your
user frames. Unit frames.
Yeah. Well, do you know what I'd say then? That's a bad design space. Leave that design space.
Yeah.
Just design different.
Yeah. Even though that's actually kind of good at time dispel, it is intentionally misleading and intentionally trying to catch healers out.
If you want to do that right, then your tank should say, ally, fantasy-wise, it's the tank saying, my dear healer, I am in peril. Can I hath an external? Okay, well, that's natural teamwork instead of setting up a confusing gotcha. Which, I mean, a boss, if you're a boss, that's actually a good way to mess up the player. But with your mechanics, that makes sense logically. You can see the challenge, you can see the thing the players are supposed to overcome, but your game UI just does an awful job of displaying that, so it's therefore not a mechanic you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. By the definition that I think Blizzard would call something hand-holding, enemies having animations in Dark Souls would be hand-holding.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because all that it is clearly communicating what the fuck's going on. Now, it's just naturally harder in an MMO, especially a fast-paced one like World of Warcraft. And anytime they've tried to slow the pace by having specs with downtime that is substantial, putting more things in the global cooldown, people haven't liked it.
Because people want their smashy button go forward.
Yeah, because the second you play Lost Ark and you have like 4 abilities that each do 8 trillion things and stunlock all the enemies, you feel powerful and that feels good. And they know that feels good in World of Warcraft.
Lost Ark even had its own issue of difficulty, where people wanted it was the same actually issue we're talking about here, with the gear curve being, well, here's a linear gear progression, but difficulty also goes up. So if you want the best gear, you have to do the hardest difficulty, and people were struggling against design elements being introduced to different difficulties before, because they're like, well, I just hold W and do my damage. And that also had a struggle of like not being very good for figuring out how much damage you're doing, because you just kind of have to intuit it. And that resulted in like kind of the same problem of having a lot of the like lower skilled player base causing issues for larger skilled player base, because they're like, well, why can't I progress? And like, you're not good enough. Like, but the game didn't tell me that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great example, not a great example, but a principle. The clip of me talking about the design principle of less but better, it was like pretty disliked, because a lot of people are saying, oh, Michael, that's just an excuse for lazy fucking game developers to give me less shit. But the thing is, whenever you say, look at a dance routine, which I'll admit it's something I barely ever do, but
I wish I could appreciate a good choreography.
If you see some dance where it's just everyone's doing different shit, it's barely choreographed and it's just a flipping disaster, versus some absolutely pro job where it's beautifully in sync and choreographed. There's always going to be, even if the moves are hard, there will be a degree of intentionality and simplicity that is, the sort of the whole sequence expresses. Because you need visual clarity for the audience to be able to perceive something. A really good example is the fucking 2 Steve Jobs documentaries. One of them was just, here are scenes from his life from start to end, and it's shit. And the other one is, we're going to the one that has Aaron Sorkin writing, it is just, we're going to center this on 3 key events, and we're going to have focus, and therefore it'll be good. And of course it's way better, because it turns out when you're going to watch a movie, you're there to appreciate writing and performances, not just to see scenes that portray a sequence that you already know. So
I don't know about that.
going into a game like World of Warcraft, if you think of some of the most satisfying boss fights out there, they are so clearly visual. Often ones where, Black Hand, the floor breaks. The floor breaks in segments. 2 times. Or, anything like that is clearly communicated by the environment. Or it requires using your eyes, but it also is relatively simple.
Fuck, imagine Kaivesa if there wasn't a hexagon on the floor. Imagine if Kaivesa was just a simple circle floor. You'd be fucking done for. Oh, it'd be so hard.
So less but better. Really good example that World of Warcraft, I think, struggles with is sometimes WoW tries to get its difficulty from cognitive load, and Ovanax is a great example of that with the swirlies. Now, the swirlies to me, the reason why Blizzard do the swirlies is to increase cognitive load. So that in addition to maybe firing externals in your mates, whatever the core thing that your role's got to do, positioning, the overall strategy of the fight, maybe you're thinking, okay, where's the next set of eggs? If I get the thing, where am I going to go? Well, if you think about that too much in advance, there's no game. So Blizzard throws in the swirlies. But the swirlies are just noise.
Just pure
shit. Blizzard increases the difficulty by reducing the signal to noise ratio, meaning it's less clear and failure is easier because of cognitive overload. But that is not a form of failure that I think any player finds satisfying. So when you see like a really well-designed FF14 fight, and I think FF14 is a good example because so much of it ends up being a positional dance.
Yeah, they're super, super clean with where cognitive load comes from, and cognitive load is always super, super, super intentional in those fights, and you can tell because I think I said this before a while ago. They time mechanics to line up with your cooldown windows. So your 2-minute burst comes up, and then you're like doing that while the hardest mechanic of the fight happens. And you're like, you motherfucker. If I was doing 1, 2, 3, I would be able to do this. But I'm also trying to play piano, so I'm getting killed.
At worst with Blizzard, it feels like they're not confident in their design. So they just decide to get like, you know, Blizzard's standard seasoning mix, and they just fucking put lashings over it, and it's in the form of swirlies.
Yeah, it's kind of like the swirlies. The overnight swirlies are maybe the perfect example. That fight we would have cleared that so much faster.
On a purple floor. Dark purple swirly on a purple floor with a massive boss, with what WoW's mechanics look like. I mean,
with the eggs having collision, and also A-bomb limb being above the swirlies. Fuck, I hate A-bomb limb so much, man. Oh, Jesus.
And that's a great example. You should like A-bomb limb because it's fucking cool. And normally, when I see A-bomb limb going off, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, that looks awesome. In the same way, whenever there's a bunch of ads and the Warriors blade storming, it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
But the signal to noise ratio visually means that cool thing is no longer cool. And I think a version of World of Warcraft where you basically turn off your ability to see the cool thing that your friend has done because you need to see the stupid swirly in the floor. Great. You just strip the fantasy out of it.
Yeah, I think it's cognitive load's an interesting one because I think it's actually where most of World of Warcraft challenge from. It's binary knowledge, then cognitive load. That's the problem. It's keeping on top of everything at once. And that's what's actually killing us in Anserac Phase 1 is because I'm trying to think about everything that's happening next and keep the order of things in my head. And then I will like not have a vampiric blood up in front of Feast and be like, fuck.
I love the Gordon Ramsay, the raid is raw, more swirlies.
Yeah, and swirlies feel like a really bad example. Specific, not just because of the randomness, not just because of the floor, but because of where they are. It actually does feel like just pure noise. There's an example, there's a video of Jake Paul training to box. And the training aside, which is fucking nonsensical, or seems that way rather, they also have simulated fight noise and simulated fight variables going on, which means when he's trying to do his circuit training, there's some crowd noise playing really loudly randomly. People are blaring air horns at him, and at one point someone throws a bucket of water on him. And you're like, that's just bullshit. You just added bullshit. You've made that harder, but for not meaningful way. Yeah. You've made it just fucking annoying.
I think a problem Blizzard runs into, and it's a very fair problem. It's one that I think every developer naturally falls into because, you know, you obviously have got the blinkers on because you're working within your project. But sometimes what's lost is the universal truths. You're working with humans and their perception. That's the same no matter everywhere else. So less is more works whenever I change our video thumbnails in the news channel, apply less is more to a few more things, and suddenly our views are they'll probably push 5 million, up from struggling to hit 2. Because I apply less than more. And the reason why less than more works is people more clearly understand the value one of those videos could have to them, because I've told them quite clearly. Now, let's, it's good to apply these in like different contexts. Whenever you see a YouTube video thumbnail that's just 8 million things, they're all high contrast. There's intersecting lines. They're messing up their tangent line rules. It just is fucking soup and you don't know what it is. Whenever you look at a movie poster that has 85 actors' faces on it and there's text everywhere, that's an awful movie poster because it's not clearly communicating its value. It's not clearly communicating its purpose. Well, your extra swirlies in WoW, or all of your UI bloat in WoW, it's the same fucking thing. It's communication and human perception. People, it just doesn't, that's basically the thing. So much of the stuff in WoW does not communicate its purpose to people clearly.
Yeah, I will highlight, I think specifically, Overnax is almost an outlier in the raid. I will say, generally speaking, I think the rest of the raid is very, very, very intentional with it. It's just, I think those swirlies were maybe, we need a bit more difficulty in this fight and we don't really know how to get it within the context of the design, because like Anserac doesn't just do random shit at you.
There's better ways to do that. If you want to do that with swirlies and even still have a goddamn swirly, maybe when you kill the parasite or you kill the whatever, it is going to explode into a little bomb. Yeah. Or maybe whenever you kill the spit boy blows up and then swirlies rain around everywhere. But that's a fine use of swirlies because it's so clearly...
If the thing is happening at a time, so you know what to do.
Yeah.
Or if they... Because I really like, as an example, Kaivesa, right? Kaivesa's Starless Night is the hexagons explode. Or even Silken Court's Takashi's Intermission, where he does the webs in the cones. I think those are good examples of, like, without those, you'd just be dodging, you would do whatever. It is that difficulty, but they happen in patterns and they happen in ways that are predictable. You move and move and move. If you don't do it right, if you forget or you're busy, it hits you. But in a way that's less annoying. So I think if they ended up like coming out in lines, and say it was like, here's a line of swirlies, line of swirlies, line of swirlies, and they happen pretty fast. But as long as there was a pattern to it or something, then you'd be able to do it. Yeah.
Brilliant comment from one of our long timers that brings up a really good point from Night Stalker. Last 20 minutes were/are extremely frustrating to listen to. You don't seem to want people to learn through trial and error. That's the thing.
Yes.
I do want people to learn through trial and error. I want that to be calibrated. And I think the problem is, currently, WoW asks people to learn via trial and error at the expense of somebody else's time. So in the context of a raid, learning via trial, I mean, obviously that's great. I actually, as a group, we'll know the overall fight, but we'll just be like, here's the mechanics, fuck it, let's just go. And that's way more fun. Totally with you. Totally with you. And the best boss fights are the ones where you can almost just go in and completely learn via trial and error because you feel like the mechanics are fairly clearly, communicated to you. So trial and error, absolutely good. I think it is just setting things up so that players, without having to rely on add-ons and stuff like that, that they feel that learning via trial and error is an accessible thing for them. And this is just me being pragmatic. Because in an ideal world, it's very clear what all of these things are. There is 100% informational transparency. There is therefore no excuse for anyone to fail any of these mechanics. And therefore everybody's rude by being bad at WoW. But the thing is, it's like that difference between ideology, sort of ideologies and philosophies, but then the pragmatic thing where you could basically say, well, you know what? I just don't believe that the government should have a tax on, on sugary drinks. But then somebody else could say, well, that's a totally fine, small government, get out of my fucking yard. I get that. I'm actually really sympathetic to that. But then the pragmatic side of that could be, well, if we do this, it's going to have this impact. You're going to raise, this tax, which will be useful. And you'll save this much in the health service. And, whatever you maybe end up sort of via some psychological nudges, moving people towards moving them towards patterns of behavior that have less negative externalities. And negative externalities behavior, like this is all bread and butter WoW problems. It might be a fucking good example of public policy. If you're full raw libertarian, then the idea of the government having a tax on plastic bags at a shop is ridiculous.
Don't tread on me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to have your don't tread on me boxers on, firing your AR. Right, and like, there's totally a large bit of me that's like, well, yeah, fucking personal responsibility.
I'm going to be really honest.
But the thing is, pragmatically, the flipping plastic bag tax thing fucking worked. And it's actually not an unpopular policy, at least in the UK.
Yeah, it worked really well. Now I have paper bags at Marks & Spencer's and they're fucking dog shit. And I'm buying them for like 30p and my life's miserable.
And so the thing is, it's really easy to use 100% informational transparency. And look, we're all top-end players probably here.
We're close enough to it anyway.
Because like the top end...
Top end, because top end actually means like...
We're all
raiders.
upper quartile.
Yeah.
We're all upper quartile players who know how to get every single bit of information. There is nothing we don't know and nothing we don't know how to know.
Yeah.
And the problem is that makes it harder for us to work out what a good World of Warcraft looks like. Because the challenge is... I mean, you remember living early delves?
I do indeed.
The people who are item level 610 or 600 and they can't kill Zekfir. And we think about that like, well, whatever, I'll be doing this many 100,000 DPS. How could I not kill him? He'll be dead in 2.5 minutes, or 2 minutes, or whatever it's going to be. And the thing is, well, yeah, with everything I know, I'm going to do that much DPS at eye level 600. But maybe somebody else is playing a Rat Paladin who thinks that because flipping... Oh my god, the name of your main spender. I'm so bad with ability names.
Templar's Verdict?
Yeah.
Final Verdict?
Yeah. They think that Final Verdict, well, that's my big DPS button. I better hit that all the time. Therefore, they're always overcapping all of their holy power generation. They may never clock on that they're making a mistake. And that's a great example of how, we might both be at level 600, but one of us, Zekfir, is pissed, the other one, it's impossible. And so... we are held back by what we know and the informational gap between us and the fucking target people that we're trying to sort of lift up. And I guess you look at why a lot of technocratic governments, and that's probably, for fucking our government now, who I'd say are leaning more in the technocrat direction, the problem they're going to have is like, yeah, okay, they're going to be policy wonks. They're going to be focusing policy, focusing on what's the best way we can do this. But then you're going to have a lot of implicit assumptions baked in because you have all the fucking information. But the people whose patterns of behavior need to change for you to achieve your goals, they don't know all the things that you know. That's one of the problems with World of Warcraft. So the fucking game designers of World of Warcraft, goddamn, they know everything about the game. And they probably play with weak auras. And
of course they fucking do.
And they know that their content has got to be possible for people who don't have weak auras and Plater. And it technically is. But they probably don't...
Very technically.
Yeah,
very technically.
But they probably don't appreciate the experience of playing the game without weak auras and without Plater and without understanding what either one of them is. Because you can't delete that. You can't delete that you know that those things are there. And fuck, whenever me or you talk about like an add-on, well, that's just like, yeah, we go to CurseForge, download the add-on, /reload your UI, get a fucking import string, done. To somebody else, they're like, an add-on? I need another application? And even though we know that's like 50 seconds.
If even.
To them, it's an unknown. Doesn't matter how many seconds it is. It's an unknown. So they're not going to do it. Add-on shouldn't be the solution to the problem anyway.